David pulled his black BMW into the dusty construction site and immediately felt annoyed. His expensive shoes were going to get dirty, and he had 3 more meetings after this one. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his tailored suit jacket, and looked around at the chaos of his latest building project. Workers in hard hats moved around like busy ants. Some carried heavy bags of cement. Others operated loud machines that made his ears hurt. The smell of fresh concrete mixed with sawdust filled the air. David checked his gold watch. He was already running late for his next appointment. "This better be worth my time," he muttered to himself. As he walked toward the main building, something caught his eye. In the corner, near a pile of electrical equipment, sat a small figure in an old, faded hoodie. The person wore dirty work boots that looked like they had seen better days. Their hood was pulled up, completely hiding their face. They worked quietly on a complex electrical panel, their hands moving with surprising speed and precision. David assumed this was just another temporary worker. His construction manager had mentioned hiring some people through a local agency to help finish the project faster. These workers usually didn't speak much English and kept to themselves. That was fine with David, as long as the work got done. He spotted his construction manager, Tony, talking to a group of workers near the entrance. David walked over, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. "Tony, we need to talk about the timeline," David said loudly, not caring who heard him. "The city inspector is coming next week and everything needs to be perfect." Tony nodded nervously. "Don't worry, boss. We're making good progress. The electrical work is actually ahead of schedule." David glanced back at the hooded figure, who was still working on the same panel. "What about these temporary people you hired? Can they handle the complex stuff?" "Oh, that one over there?" Tony looked toward the corner. "They've been doing amazing work, actually. Really knows their stuff." David frowned. He had built his successful tech company by paying attention to details and making smart decisions about people. In his experience, workers who dressed like that usually did simple tasks, carrying things, cleaning up, basic labor. The important technical work needed educated professionals. He decided to walk over and check on the progress himself. As he got closer, he could see the electrical panel was incredibly complex. Dozens of colored wires ran in perfect patterns. Digital displays showed numbers and codes that meant nothing to David, but he knew they were important for the building's smart systems. The hooded worker continued their task, completely focused. They used special tools that David had never seen before, testing wires and making tiny adjustments. Their movements looked confident and experienced. "Hey there," David said loudly, the way people sometimes talk to children or tourists. "How's the work going?" The person didn't look up or respond. They just kept working on the panel. David felt a bit ignored and spoke even louder. "I said, how is the work going?" Still no response. The worker seemed to be reading something on a small device, then made another adjustment to the wiring. Tony walked up behind David. "They don't talk much," he explained quietly, "but the work quality is incredible. I've never seen electrical installation this clean and organized." David nodded but felt frustrated. He was used to people paying attention when he spoke. After all, this was his building, his money, his project. The least this worker could do was acknowledge him. "Well, just make sure they follow all the safety rules," David said, still speaking loudly near the hooded figure. "These people sometimes cut corners if you don't watch them carefully." The workers' hands paused for just a moment, then continued with their task. David spent the next few minutes walking around the site, pointing out issues and giving instructions to Tony. But his eyes kept drifting back to the corner where the mysterious worker sat. There was something about their focus and skill that seemed unusual for a temporary laborer. When David finally returned to his car, he glanced back one more time. The hooded figure was now working on a different section of the panel and had somehow completed what looked like hours of work in just the short time David had been there. Probably just simple stuff, David told himself as he started his engine. The real engineers will handle the complicated parts later. As he drove away, raising a cloud of dust behind his BMW, David had no idea that the person he had just dismissed would soon become the most important part of his entire project. He had looked at the old hoodie, the worn boots, and the quiet behavior, and made up his mind about who this person was and what they could do. Sometimes the biggest mistakes come from the smallest assumptions, and David was about to learn this lesson in a way he would never forget. 3 days later, David woke up to his phone ringing at 6 in the morning. The harsh sound cut through his peaceful sleep like a knife. He rolled over in his king-sized bed, squinting at the bright screen. Tony's name flashed on the display. "This better be important," David mumbled as he answered the call. "Boss, we have a huge problem." Tony's voice sounded panicked. "You need to get down here right now." David sat up quickly, suddenly wide awake. "What kind of problem?" "The whole electrical system is dead. Everything. The lights, the elevators, the air conditioning, the security systems, nothing works, and the city inspector is coming in 2 hours. David's heart sank. This was his worst nightmare. The city inspection was crucial for getting the building permits approved. Without those permits, he couldn't rent out the offices or apartments. Without rental income, he couldn't pay back the massive loans he had taken to build this place. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, David said, jumping out of bed. He threw on clothes and raced to the construction site, his mind spinning with worry. This building project had cost him nearly everything. He had invested his life savings, borrowed money from friends, and taken out huge bank loans. If this project failed, he would lose his house, his car, his company, everything he had worked for over the past 15 years. When David arrived at the site, chaos greeted him. Workers stood around in confused groups, talking in worried voices. Emergency lights cast strange shadows everywhere. The building looked dead and empty without its normal electrical power. Tony ran up to him, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool morning air. "I've called every electrician in the city. Nobody knows what's wrong. The system is too complex, they say." David felt his stomach twist into knots. "What do you mean, too complex? Remember how we wanted this building to be smart? With all the automatic systems, computer controls, and energy-saving features? Well, it turns out connecting all those systems together is much harder than anyone expected." They walked into the building using flashlights. The main electrical room looked like something from a science fiction movie. Hundreds of wires of different colors ran in every direction. Computer screens that should have shown important information were completely black. Red warning lights blinked on several control panels. "Our regular electrical company says they're in over their heads," Tony continued. "They can fix normal wiring problems, but this smart building technology is beyond their training." David stared at the complicated mess of wires and computers. He had insisted on making this the most advanced building in the city. Now that decision was about to destroy him. "How long do we have before the inspector arrives?" David asked. Tony checked his watch. 1 hour and 43 minutes. Just then, another worker approached them. David recognized him as Pete, one of the senior construction guys who had been working on the project since the beginning. "Boss, I hate to interrupt, but I remember something," Pete said nervously. "That quiet worker in the hoodie, the one who was doing the electrical work earlier this week. They tried to warn us about this." David turned to look at Pete. "What do you mean?" 3 days ago, right after you left, they came up to me and Tony. They were pointing at some connections and shaking their head like something was wrong. But they didn't speak, and we figured they were just confused about the advanced systems." Tony nodded slowly. "Yeah, I remember that. They seemed really concerned about something, but we thought they were just not understanding the complex setup." David felt a wave of regret wash over him. He had been so quick to dismiss that worker based on their appearance. Now he wondered if they had actually spotted the problem that was about to ruin his life. "Do you know how to contact them?" David asked desperately. Pete and Tony looked at each other uncomfortably. "Well, that's the thing, boss," Tony said. "We never got their full contact information. The temp agency just sent them over and they worked for 3 days, then disappeared. We don't even know their real name." David's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his bank manager reminding him about the loan payment due next week. If this building project failed, David wouldn't be able to make that payment, or the next one, or any payments after that. "There has to be a way to find them," David said, trying not to let desperation show in his voice. "Check with the temp agency. Call other construction sites. Ask around. This person might be our only hope." Tony pulled out his phone and started making calls. David could hear him talking to different people, explaining the situation, asking if anyone knew about a skilled worker in a hoodie who didn't talk much. Meanwhile, David paced back and forth in the dark building, checking his watch every few minutes. The inspector would arrive soon, and if the electrical system wasn't working, the project would be shut down immediately. Years of work and millions of dollars would disappear in an instant. After 30 minutes of phone calls, Tony finally got a lead. "Good news, boss. Someone at a construction site across town remembers seeing that worker. They said they might still be in the area working on another project tonight." David grabbed Tony's arm. "Tonight? Where?" "There's an office building renovation happening downtown. The security guard said he saw someone matching that description working late hours this week." David checked his watch again. "The inspector would be here in 1 hour. It was now or never." "Get in the car," David said. "We're going to find our mystery worker." David and Tony raced through the city streets as the sun began to set. David's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every red light felt like torture. Every minute that passed brought him closer to complete disaster. "There it is." Tony pointed to a tall office building with scaffolding wrapped around its sides. "The security guard said he saw someone working on the electrical systems after hours." David parked quickly and they both ran toward the building entrance. A tired-looking security guard sat behind a small desk, reading a newspaper under a dim lamp. "Excuse me," David said, trying to catch his breath. "We're looking for someone, a worker in a hoodie who's been doing electrical work here at night." The security guard looked up slowly. "Oh, you mean the quiet one?" "Yeah. They've been coming here for the past few nights. Real dedicated worker. Never seen anyone work so late and so focused." "Are they here now?" Tony asked urgently. "Should be. I saw them go up to the 15th floor about an hour ago with a toolbox. Elevator's that way." David and Tony practically ran to the elevator. As they rode up, David's phone showed multiple missed calls from the city inspector's office. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. Time was running out faster than water through a broken dam. The elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, revealing a dark hallway lit only by emergency lights. At the far end, they could see a soft glow coming from one of the office spaces. They walked quietly toward the light, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Through the doorway, they saw a familiar figure, the same old hoodie, the same worn work boots, the same focused concentration. The person was working on an electrical panel that looked just as complex as the one at David's building. Wires of every color imaginable connected to computer screens, showing scrolling numbers and graphs. "Excuse me," David said softly, not wanting to startle them. The hooded worker looked up for just a moment, then returned to their task. But this time, something was different. In the better lighting of the office building, David could see the person's hands more clearly. These weren't the rough, calloused hands he had expected from a manual laborer. They were precise and careful, like those of a surgeon or an artist. "We need your help," David continued. "Remember the building where you worked 3 days ago? The one with the smart electrical systems?" The worker stopped what they were doing and turned to face David and Tony. Still, the hood remained up, casting shadows across their face. "The whole system failed," David explained desperately. "Everything you tried to warn us about has come true. The city inspector is coming, and if we can't fix this problem, I'll lose everything." For a long moment, the worker said nothing. David held his breath, waiting for any kind of response. Then, in perfect, clear English, the worker spoke. I wondered when someone would finally listen. David's jaw dropped open. The voice was educated, confident, and absolutely nothing like what he had expected. This person spoke like a college professor, not a temporary construction worker. You can help us? Tony asked hopefully. I can fix your problem, the worker replied, gathering their tools. But we need to hurry. These smart building systems are delicate. The longer they stay broken, the harder they become to repair. During the car ride back to David's building, the hooded worker explained exactly what had gone wrong. They used technical terms that David barely understood, but he could tell this person knew more about electrical systems than anyone he had ever met. The main issue is integration, the worker explained. Your building has 5 different smart systems, trying to communicate with each other. The lighting system, the security system, the climate control, the elevators, and the fire safety equipment. When you connect them all together, you need special programming to make them work as a team instead of fighting each other. Like a symphony orchestra, David said, finally beginning to understand. All the instruments need to play together, not just make noise at the same time. Exactly. The worker nodded approvingly. When they arrived at David's building, the worker immediately went to the main electrical room. David and Tony followed, along with several other construction workers who had stayed late to help with the crisis. What happened next amazed everyone watching. The hooded worker's hands moved across the control panels like a pianist playing a complicated piece of music. They connected different wires, typed commands into computer terminals, and adjusted settings with incredible speed and confidence. This connection here was causing a feedback loop, they explained while working. And this programming code had a timing error that made the systems crash into each other. Slowly, one by one, the building systems came back to life. First, the emergency lighting switched to normal power. Then the elevators hummed back to life. The air conditioning system started running smoothly. Computer screens throughout the building began showing normal operating information instead of error messages. But the worker wasn't finished. As David watched in amazement, they began making improvements to the original design. They connected systems in ways that made the building more energy efficient. They programmed automatic features that would save money on electricity bills. They even installed backup systems that would prevent this kind of failure from ever happening again. How do you know all this? David asked in wonder. The worker paused in their task and looked at him. Experience, they said simply, then returned to work. By the time the city inspector arrived the next morning, the building was running better than David had ever dreamed possible. Every system worked perfectly. The inspector was so impressed that he completed the approval process in record time. As the inspector left with signed permits in hand, David turned to thank the mysterious worker. But they were already packing up their tools, preparing to leave once again. Wait, David called out. I don't even know your name, and I want to offer you a permanent job with my company. What you did here was incredible. The worker stopped and looked at David for a long moment. Then slowly they reached up toward their hood. Time seemed to slow down as the worker's hands moved toward their hood. David held his breath, his heart beating so loud he could hear it in his ears. After everything that had happened, he was finally going to see who had saved his entire future. They workers' fingers gripped the edge of the faded hoodie. With one smooth motion, they pulled it back and off their head. Long, dark hair cascaded down like a waterfall, catching the morning sunlight streaming through the building's windows. David's eyes went wide with shock. The person who had just saved his $1-million project was a woman, and not just any woman. Dr. Chen, Tony whispered in amazement. David's mouth fell open. He recognized her immediately. Dr. Lisa Chen, the famous electrical engineering professor from the State University. Her face had been on the cover of Engineering Weekly magazine just 6 months ago. She was known as one of the smartest people in the country when it came to smart building technology. You're You're Dr. Chen, David stammered, feeling like his brain had stopped working properly. But what were you doing working construction? Why were you dressed like... Dr. Chen smiled gently as she shook out her hair. Like a regular worker? She finished his sentence. Because I am a regular worker? Just a different kind than you expected. David felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He remembered how he had spoken to her 3 days ago, loudly and slowly, as if she couldn't understand English. He remembered making assumptions about her intelligence and abilities based on her clothes and appearance. I don't understand, David said quietly. You're a famous professor. You could work anywhere in the world. Why were you here, dressed like that, doing construction work? Dr. Chen sat down on a nearby crate, looking tired after working all night to fix his building. I'm on sabbatical from the university, she explained. That means I'm taking a break from teaching to learn new things. I wanted to understand how my engineering theories work in the real world, with real buildings and real problems. Tony scratched, his head still looking confused. So you've been working construction jobs on purpose? Exactly, Dr. Chen nodded. I've spent years in classrooms and laboratories creating theories about smart buildings and energy systems. But I realized I didn't really know how these things worked when real people had to install them, maintain them, and live with them every day. David felt like someone had turned his world upside down. So you've been going from construction site to construction site, learning how the real world works, Dr. Chen finished. And you know what I discovered? Some of the smartest, most skilled people I've ever met don't have college degrees or fancy titles. They have experience, wisdom, and incredible problem-solving. Abilities that you can't learn from textbooks. She stood up and gestured toward the electrical systems she had just repaired. The man who taught me advanced wiring techniques has been doing electrical work for 30 years, but never went to college. The woman who showed me how to troubleshoot complex systems learned everything from her father, who learned from his father. David's embarrassment was growing stronger by the minute. He realized how wrong he had been about everything. But why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell us who you were? Dr. Chen's expression became more serious. Because I wanted to see how people would treat me when they thought I was just another worker. And honestly, your reaction was exactly what I expected, but it still disappointed me. I'm so sorry, David said, and he truly meant it. I made terrible assumptions about you. I judged you based on your clothes and the way you looked, not on your abilities or your intelligence. You're not the only one, Dr. Chen replied. It happens at almost every job site I visit. People see the old hoodie and work boots and they immediately decide what kind of person I must be and what I'm capable of doing. Tony stepped forward. But you saved our entire project. If you hadn't been here, David would have lost everything. Dr. Chen agreed. But here's what bothers me. I tried to warn you about the problems 3 days ago. I saw the issues developing and tried to get your attention. But because you thought I was just a simple laborer, you ignored my concerns. David remembered that moment clearly now. He had seen her trying to show them something on the electrical panel, but he had dismissed it as confusion or lack of understanding. His assumptions had almost cost him everything. How many other times has this happened? David asked quietly. How many other people have been ignored or dismissed because of how they look or where they work? More than you would believe, Dr. Chen said sadly. I've met construction workers who could teach college courses, cleaning staff who speak 4 languages fluently, and security guards who have incredible insights about building design. But most people never bother to listen to them. David felt ashamed of himself, but also curious. What made you decide to spend your sabbatical this way? Most professors would travel or work on research projects. Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since revealing her identity. My grandfather was a construction worker who immigrated here with nothing but his skills and his determination. He built bridges, schools, and hospitals that are still standing today. But people often treated him like he wasn't important because of his accent and his work clothes. She paused, looking around at the building she had just saved. I wanted to understand what that felt like, and I wanted to honor the wisdom and skills of people like him. Plus, I learned more about real engineering in these past 6 months than in years of theoretical work. David nodded slowly, beginning to understand. And now, what happens next? Dr. Chen picked up her toolbox and smiled. Now I go back to teaching, but with a completely different understanding of what engineering really means. And hopefully I can help train the next generation of engineers to respect and value all kinds of knowledge and all kinds of people. She started walking toward the exit, then turned back. Oh, and David, next time someone tries to warn you about a potential problem, maybe listen to them regardless of what they're wearing. David stood there for a long moment after Dr. Chen walked away, staring at the perfectly functioning electrical systems around him. Her words echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't stop hearing. He had almost lost everything because of his own prejudices and assumptions. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about all the people he might have dismissed over the years without giving them a real chance. How many good ideas had he ignored? How many talented people had he overlooked simply because they didn't look the way he expected? Smart, capable people to look? The next morning, David made a decision that would change his life forever. He drove to the university where Dr. Chen taught and waited outside her office like a student hoping to speak with a professor. "David?" Dr. Chen looked surprised to see him sitting in the hallway. "What are you doing here?" "I want to make you an offer," David said, standing up quickly. "But it's not what you might think." Dr. Chen invited him into her office, which was filled with books, scientific papers, and models of various building systems. Awards and certificates covered one entire wall, reminding David of just how accomplished she really was. "I don't want to hire you as a consultant," David began. "I want to partner with you on something much bigger. I want to change how my entire company works, and I need your help to do it right." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "What kind of changes are you talking about?" David took a deep breath. "First, I want to create a program where all my construction workers are treated with equal respect, regardless of their background or education. I want to make sure everyone's ideas and concerns are heard and valued." "That's a good start, Doctor," Chen said slowly. "But talk is cheap. What does that look like in practice?" "Fair wages for everyone, for starters. No more assuming that people can't contribute just because they don't have college degrees. And I want to create regular meetings where any worker can share ideas or concerns about projects, no matter what job they're doing." Dr. Chen leaned forward, now looking more interested. "Go on." "Second, I want to incorporate your sustainable building technologies into all my future projects, not just because it's good for the environment, but because I saw how much better they work when they're properly installed and integrated." "And third?" Dr. Chen asked. David smiled. "Third, I want to create a training program that brings together university students and experienced construction workers. Let them learn from each other. Your students can understand how their theories work in practice, and the workers can share their knowledge and maybe even earn college credits." Dr. Chen was quiet for several minutes, thinking carefully about David's proposal. "You know this will cost you more money up front, right? Paying fair wages, implementing new technologies, creating training programs, none of that is cheap." "I figured that out," David nodded. "But I also learned something important. When people feel valued and respected, they do better work. When systems are designed properly from the beginning, they save money in the long run. And when you treat people well, word gets around and you attract the best workers. Plus," David continued, "I nearly lost everything because I ignored good advice from someone I didn't think was worth listening to. I can't afford to make that mistake again." Dr. Chen stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the campus where students hurried between classes. "If we do this partnership, I have some conditions." "I'm listening." "First, this isn't just about my technologies or my ideas. We need to actively seek out and listen to wisdom from all kinds of people: experienced workers, young apprentices, cleaning staff, security guards, everyone who interacts with the buildings we create. David nodded eagerly. Agreed. Second, we measure success not just by profit, but by how well our buildings serve the people who live and work in them, and by how fairly we treat everyone involved in building them. That makes sense. And third, Dr. Chen turned back to face him. You have to promise me that you'll speak up when you see other people making the same mistakes you made with me. This isn't just about changing your company, it's about changing how the whole industry thinks about people. David stood up and extended his hand. It's a deal, Dr. Chen. 6 months later, David's company had become completely transformed. The training program was so successful that other universities wanted to copy it. Workers from all backgrounds were contributing ideas that saved money and improved building quality. The company's reputation for treating people fairly had attracted some of the best talent in the city. Most importantly, David had learned to see people differently. When he visited construction sites now, he made sure to talk with everyone, not just the supervisors and engineers, but also the people doing hands-on work. He discovered that some of his best innovations came from conversations with people he previously would have ignored. Dr. Chen's sustainable building technologies had made David's company a leader in environmentally friendly construction. But more than that, the partnership had created a model for how businesses could succeed by valuing all kinds of knowledge and treating all people with dignity. 1 year after that night when Dr. Chen pulled off her hoodie, David received an award from the state's Engineering Society for innovation in sustainable building design. At the award ceremony, he insisted that Dr. Chen join him on stage. This award doesn't belong just to me, David told the audience of engineers, architects, and business leaders. It belongs to every person who contributed their skills, knowledge, and hard work to make these projects successful. From university professors to experienced electricians to young apprentices learning their trade. After the ceremony, David and Dr. Chen walked outside into the cool evening air. You know what the best part of this whole experience has been? David asked. What's that? I used to think success meant being the smartest person in the room, David said. Now I know that real success comes from recognizing the intelligence and wisdom that exists in every room and creating an environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing it. Dr. Chen smiled. My grandfather would have liked you, I think. He always said that the strongest buildings are made when all the workers feel proud of their contribution. As they walked toward their cars, David reflected on how much his life had changed since that moment when a mysterious worker in an old hoodie had saved his entire future. He had learned that assumptions can be dangerous, that wisdom comes in many forms, and that treating people with respect isn't just the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers, if we're humble enough to listen.